My name is Lisa Alastuey, and welcome to my channel. My channel has inspirational and informational videos. If that sounds good to you and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. My guest today is Michael Ashley, who is a former powerlifting champion, NBBA Natural Mr. America, IFBB World Champion, and Arnold Classic Champion. Michael is also the owner of Say Fitness and a certified personal trainer. I will be linking his website and Instagram down below for your reference. Welcome, Michael.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lisa.
Thank you for coming on. So let's just kind of start a little bit with your background. You have a very unique background. Would you mind sharing that, a brief history with the audience?
Oh, not at all. So you want to start from the
Jamaica.
Jamaican?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was born in the island of Jamaica, and I moved to the United States at the age of 15. And it was one of those situations where at that age, you have a lot of friends in the islands, and I wasn't really excited about coming to the United States. But once I got here and I went to high school, I developed another slew of friends here. So, it turned out very well for me. In the islands, I ran pretty much track and field and played soccer. And so when I came to the United States, of course, I joined a track team in high school and pretty much ran track until, I graduated from high school and I went in the military. And of course, I was in the Army, 82nd Airborne, pretty proud of it, loved it, enjoyed every minute of it. And, it went on from there. How much further you want me to go?
So maybe we'll jump forward. So you come from an athletic background with high school sports. Let's get into, how did you get into the bodybuilding and the powerlifting?
Okay, actually, yeah, we were very close to that point because my first experience with anything bodybuilding related happened in high school. And it so happened that they had a talent show. I went to Bryant High School in Long Island City, New York, and they had a talent show. I was a senior, my brother was a junior, and I had some experience lifting. And I didn't really want to compete against my brother. I mean, I performed a little better in the lifting than he did. And so I wanted to do something else. And there was this friend of mine, she played baseball, and she says, why don't you do bodybuilding? And I didn't know anything about bodybuilding. So I grabbed the bodybuilding magazine and, put together some poses. And that was my first experience ever. And at the same time, I got with the music teacher, and he made this really nice background music for me. I went on stage, and it was defined by your academic level in school, so your grades, and of course, how well you interact with the fellow students, and then of course, your performance. And I ended up winning that event. So I became Mr. Bryant. And when I graduated from high school, of course, I went in the military. And in the Army, it wasn't a big thing for bodybuilding, but it was for powerlifting. So I learned that by joining the powerlifting team, not only did I get half a day off to train with the powerlifting team, I also got separate rations. That means we call it the mess hall. So I didn't have to eat in a mess hall. I had separate rations so I could purchase my own meals, and at the same time being able to lift with the team. So I would do my military duties half of the day, and then I was required to lift with the powerlifting team the other half. And that's how the powerlifting portion started.
That is so interesting. Well, your friend must have had an eye for your potential, your genetics, your structure, and saw something maybe before you even saw it.
Yeah, well, there's a part here I skipped. I actually was introduced to lifting prior to getting into the military. It just so happened, it was like, again, my senior year, I was at the bus stop, and this one gentleman came up to me and he said, you have potential. You look like you have potential. I'm opening up a gym, and it was in Queens, New York, and I want you to come down and check it out. So when I went there, I got my whole introduction to the whole lifting and bodybuilding in that environment. But I went off and went in the military, and that's where I got exposed to powerlifting. So I got a little of both and different avenues. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So would you say that your passion for it began at a young age and then it just developed into this competition mode down the road?
Yeah, well, it got into competition mode right from my teenage year.
Oh, right.
So what happened is those gentlemen I told you about that invited me down to that gym. I started working out with one of the owners, and he more or less started steering me in the direction. And the whole thing about potential, they say, why don't you compete in? And my first competition ever was the Teenage Mr. America. And I competed in that event and I got third. And of course, having that experience, I was hooked and it was all over. So I continued, but you know, when I went in the military, I had to first fulfill my requirements as a soldier,
Mhm.
and part of that was also being on the powerlifting team, and then of course doing my military duties. But then I worked in my bodybuilding, so I kind of interlaced both of them throughout that initial period. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I got to meet you at the Arnold Classic this year, and I was able to attend the seminar on Sunday where all of the past winners of the Arnold Classic were present on stage. And there you were up there representing 1990. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit about that experience?
Well, in 1990 for me was it was really a special year because I've competed my entire bodybuilding career without using anabolic steroids. And that was the first year that they were going to be testing the athletes in the 1990 Arnold Classic. And it so happened that, you know, I'd won the world championships in 1986, and that was also drug tested. And, you know, I competed in a couple of additional pro shows prior to 1990. But when I went into the 1990 Arnold Classic, um, because the drug tested, I ended up becoming the winner of that event. So it really just catapulted my career in such a manner that was just, you know, couldn't ask for anything more, because to me, it's the second most prestigious event
Mhm.
in bodybuilding. Mr.
Mhm.
Olympia is really considered the most prestigious, even though Arnold and his team does a phenomenal job for the athletes.
Yes, yes. So, question about the testing. Is that something that they did before the competition, during the competition, or after the competition?
They did it before the actual competition, but what happened was they didn't give the results till after. So
Why?
yeah,
Why would they wait?
I didn't know the whole story behind it. I think it was more a media thing than anything. So, you know, because there were certain athletes that got disqualified also, and
Um,
I just think it wasn't the best thing for airing it and then letting that happen. That was just part of one of my thinking in regards to that.
Yes, yes. Well, that's really interesting. I was really impressed with the Arnold Classic and how, like, the first place winner was they increased the prize money to 300,000 this year. The
Mhm,
Olympia first place gets 400,000. And so it's
mhm.
evolved since your time in 1990. You've seen kind of that evolution of growth, especially in prize money.
Yes. And I'm extremely happy for them. As a matter of fact, I made a little video prior to the Arnold Classic, you know, just commending Arnold and actually adding that extra $100,000 to the prize money, because bodybuilding, it involves a lot of work, it involves a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, and sometimes there are sacrifices made too. You know, so when an athlete compete at that level, you know, there's monies that can be made as a result of winning the event itself outside of the event, because you know you get guest appearances, endorsement contracts, more so now than even when I was a
Mhm.
competitor. So the athletes, they have that ability, but being able to get a significant amount for the day of the event, I think is also very, very important. So I'm very happy to see how much the sport has evolved, and the accommodations for the athletes and from a compensation standpoint has increased tremendously.
Yes, yes. And so you had mentioned that you were natural and you didn't
Mhm,
take any gear. And we
mhm,
have a generation of people learning about steroids and gear and hormones very easily online.
mhm.
They can just log in and pull it up, watch a YouTube video, look at the shopping cart of what somebody's taking. What advice would you give to the younger generation that's thinking about going into bodybuilding and might feel the pressure to take gear?
Well, it's a very tough place to be. Back then it was, but I think it has evolved to even much more competitive level and pressure. So an individual going into the sport, there is a lot of possibilities prior to even being faced with that decision, because it's very surprising that most younger individuals that are getting involved right off the bat, they're not on a well-varied diet, they're not sleeping appropriately, they're not on a very structured training program, and they're out there seeking gear, as they call it. And I think it's actually the backwards approach. I think they should first maximize their genetic potential, because not all of them become competitors. Not all of them, even with all whatever they take, not all of them will ever win the Arnold Classic or the Mr. Olympia. But there's a significant larger percentage of them that can be that successful. So my advice to them would be maximize their genetic potential, doing all the basic requirements, such as, to me, adequate sleep is like a drug within itself, because
Yes.
if a person gets adequate sleep when they perform in the gym, they perform better. And their response to exercise is going to be better. And their ability to see the results of their efforts is also going to be more significant if they get adequate sleep. Some of them, if they eat a well-varied diet, that's another thing that's going to make a significant difference. And there's just so much more science-based information today compared to even when I competed. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, creatine monohydrate is, to me, is like the most highly researched supplement on the market. And for bodybuilders, it's a great supplement. And, if I was to say I'm an upcoming bodybuilder, I would be more, okay, making sure I'm getting my adequate requirement of my protein, my sleep, my training, and I would use creatine monohydrate. And I would explore those possibilities first and see where it takes me. Now, yes, in today's society, for a natural bodybuilder in the IFBB, it would be very tough. But we have also evolved. There's a lot of great natural bodybuilders today. You might not see them in the IFBB, but they exist. And so what happens is, I believe there are guys out there that can compete, but they don't want to take that step. Because I remember when I was making that decision to compete in the IFBB, because a lot of people, I won Natural Mr. America, the NBBA. And I won that. And I could have stayed in the natural organization. And some people say, well, why did you go in the IFBB? Well, my number one reason was, once you become a professional, it's no longer a hobby, it becomes a business. And the compensation for an IFBB professional is far significant compared to the compensation for a natural bodybuilder in the other organizations. I remember back then, I would do a guest appearance for over $2,000. The prize money for a natural event was not even $2,000. So when you do the comparison, it only made sense. And I remember numerous individuals said to me, well, they don't think I will make it as a natural bodybuilder in the IFBB. And I said, well, I'm going to give it a shot and see where it takes me. Mm-hmm. And winning the world championships opened the door for me to go right into the IFBB and compete. And I did well until in the 90s, when because they only tested the Arnold Classic that year, and then the Mr. Olympia. And then after that, there was no more drug testing. So it was no longer of a major interest to me, but my accomplishment has allowed me to continue in other arenas and prove to be very successful as a result of that experience I had in the IFBB.
Yes. So let's talk about your training regimen during that time to get you prepared. And, using steroids and that type of stuff, my understanding is that it helps your body repair faster. So you definitely were on a different disadvantage from others who were using it because your body wasn't taking it. So can you share with the audience a little bit about your training program?
Yeah, I don't mind. And I want to say one thing.
Sure.
I never really sat and thought of myself as, okay, well, these guys are taking steroids, I'm not. So as a result, I competed head on with them. If you look at the history, It was not a thing where I walked into a show thinking I was a handicap. So I think the mindset has a lot to do with it. Back then, I didn't do very long workouts. I will say I trained twice per day. I know some people now, they train once per day. And even though the latest research surrounding periodization, and that's the manipulation of training variables to achieve a certain goal. So, you know, back then I had my day where I trained geared around strength. One day I trained geared around hypertrophy, and in power in bodybuilding is not really of a significance in terms of power is like, 40-60% of your 1 rep maximum, and it involves strength and speed. So like the clean and jerk, the snatch, those would be the most powerful movements that you could do. And that's not necessarily in bodybuilding, but in powerlifting and bodybuilding today, we could do singles in a very explosive manner and still get that benefit. So if you say what my training was like, I had different rep ranges and I would classify them as strength and hypertrophy. And then I would more do repetitions, higher repetitions, as opposed to an explosive power type. So if you were to say a typical day for me, let's say, for example, I trained and we had various approaches. So I'll just give you one. Let's say I would train a push-pull like chest and back. I would do chest in the morning and I come back and I do back in the afternoon. So that would just give you an example. So it was shorter workouts and they were more frequent, and surrounding that, there was a lot of sleep. So yeah, just to basically give you a general overview.
Yes. So would you say you worked out more with the hand weights, machines, both? And did you do any cardio? And what was that like?
Yeah. And I will explain how I did it, and I will say how I would suggest to do it today.
Okay.
Because back then I would train, and sometimes I'd get up first thing in the morning and I do cardio. And I know there's conflicting information in regards to whether doing it on an empty stomach or not. I personally think there's no significant benefit to doing it on an empty stomach, as people thought. They say it's going to facilitate the ability to burn more, a larger percentage of fat. I think it's the level of intensity that facilitates that. And for myself, I did both. I've done fasted cardio and I've also done it just based on what was going on in my life and when I trained. But there were times when I would get up in the morning and I did cardio first thing, I ate breakfast and I went and trained. And then there were times when I get up and I trained first thing in the morning, and then in the afternoon I train again, and then later on I would do cardio. So I've used various approaches, and one of the things that I saw is I didn't see any of them really becoming a significant detriment. And maybe if I was to do a comparative study with myself, I probably could have used some of the more later information today and said, well, which Michael Ashley would have been better had he done it somewhat differently? Meaning, let's say, for example, I said, okay, well, I'm going to train first thing in the morning, and then I'm going to separate and do my cardio later on in the day. Separate them, or train first thing in the morning and then at night I train in, just total separating them, because there's information that they talk about conflicting adaptation. So it's like, one, I'm trying to put muscle on, and more of my, if you want to call it fast twitch muscle fibers, I'm putting the emphasis on that. And then when I do cardiorespiratory fitness, it's more of my endurance fibers. So there's a conflict going on there. So doing them back to back might not necessarily be more ideal for the outcome that I'm looking for. So that could be one thing. And because I used a rowing machine and I used a bike predominantly for my cardio. Sometimes I did the treadmill in the gym, but I actually had a bike and a rowing machine at home. So when I did them both, I split back and forth.
And you did that every day?
I trained 6 days per week, and I would say 3 days per week when I'm not competing. And then when I was getting ready for a competition, I would incorporate a little bit more cardio than the off season.
Okay. Did you have, I know it's so popular today to have like a guru or a nutrition coach or multiple coaches. In your era, your time, did you do it all yourself or did you have some assistance, or how did you go about your prep and all of that?
I will say, as I said to you initially, when I got into the gym, I was just learning from various individuals in the gym. Then I remembered purchasing a nutrition almanac, and I never forgot. It was just a basic understanding of nutrition. And so I got an understanding of protein, carbohydrates, fats, water, vitamins, and minerals. I got an understanding of that from that booklet. I will say in my amateur, I never really had a coach. I would get feedback from different individuals. As a matter of fact, there was a period where I did low carbohydrate diets for competitions. And then once I learned that you really don't have to do low carbohydrate dieting, so I was one of those individuals that I kept a log. I still have my log from when I started, from back those days. And I would log everything. Huh?
You should publish it.
Pretty interesting stuff, but I would log what I did. So the things that I did then was, I'd start out, I did what's called a basic dietary review. And so I get an understanding of how much I'm consuming. And then I would create a deficit. And, we based on the thought process of 500 calories, 3,500 calories per pound. So if over a week, I'll put a deficit of 500 calories. Now, I would put a portion of the deficit from my actual food, and then I would calculate a portion from my activity. Say, well, this much is coming from the activity, and this, and it's really not absolute. I'm just telling you what I did. We may look at it today and tear it apart in numerous ways, but that's kind of how I started. So I create a deficit. And one thing I learned very early, and a lot of guys still don't use that today, I learned how to do body fat testing. So I use skin fold calipers. And in the early parts of my competition years, I would have even a friend, and it wasn't necessarily a professional a person that was well versed in it. Like even my training partner, I'd say, okay, well, we take all these various skin folds and we'd get the body comp. And what I would look at is, what was I losing? Now, today, a lot of guys use the mirror as their guide. I was never a total mirror person, even though the mirror is really the true test. When you get on stage, the judges don't care what your body comp is. But back then, let's say I dieted longer. I started out dieting 12 weeks, and I realized that I sacrificed a lot of lean mass when I dieted short. So I started dieting longer, like 20 weeks. I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to start, and I'd start very conservatively. And so my projections were not very high in terms of how much weight I would want to lose on a weekly basis. And sometimes if I hit a plateau, I would increase my calories, increase my activities, and then back down. So I did a lot of various manipulations back and forth. But I think that what worked for me in that period was just being able to document everything. And, as I continue to change, if I see that the diet is working where I'm getting leaner and leaner, and I always project the goal of like around 5% body fat with skin folds. And, just based on how I lose, I would continue. And if I need to get more aggressive, I get more aggressive. If I need to back off, I back off, and I project it towards the show. Now, it so happened that I went to Arizona State initially, and I went in a dietetics program. And so right around in the 90s, I was able to be like, they were happy to have me in their lab. And so I got monitored at the university, and that's where I even got some more sound approach about, because we used to diet with lower calories. I started dieting with much higher calories than I did. And, I was advised that, you can eat more food and still be able to lose body fat just based on, managing it more appropriately. So there was a lot of evolving back and forth along the way.
Oh, that is so interesting. So let me ask you your thoughts on today's bodybuilding compared to your time. What are your thoughts about where we're at with, kind of glorifying the freak factor and the monster look? I mean, we've been doing that for a while, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I first want to say I respect where we are today. Whether it's my preference or not, we are evolving as a society. Some people will say, well, the guys of the 90s looked more pleasing. They were leaner. They were not as big. Well, the 90s are not today. And just like we had I remember in history, they talk about the first time the automobile was introduced, the people that had the horse and chariot said, oh, this will never make it. They still stuck to their guns. But we're evolving. So the evolution of bodybuilding has brought us to where we are today. I would say the guys are big, and as long as they look aesthetically pleasing, because that's what I was introduced to, the symmetrical portion. So wearing a person, the small waist, they call it the X frame today, the taper. I think that aesthetic look more pleasing on stage. And that's just based on what I've come from and even though it's not necessarily what's most appealing to some of the audiences today, if you ask me my personal view, I like the more aesthetic look. So and I'm not necessarily, when I speak, because I've been asked what I thought about this athletes compared to that athlete. I mean, Samson Dowda, I thought was definitely the winner. I saw him being the winner, but no discredit to any of the other competitors. For instance, to me, Nick Walker was really in phenomenal shape and looked really, really good. But if we were to say which one was more aesthetically pleasing and a better balance, I would say Samson Dowda. So it just depends on what is defined today as the ideal bodybuilder is what's going to really tell, how we see the sport. But I would say, I mean, there is a part with regardless of all, people talk about the drugs, there's a part of still fitness and health that's exemplified in bodybuilding somewhere there. I mean, these guys they eat well-varied diets. They do a lot of cardiorespiratory fitness. So outside of, most people resort to the drugs right off the back when you talk about them, but there's a lot more than drugs that get those guys to where they are today. And whether male or female, because I don't want to just say guys, because you have women bodybuilders too. So I don't want to negate that portion. But regardless, there is some health benefits to the strength training, the cardiorespiratory fitness, and the well-varied diet. Now, the extreme size is basically what is somewhat being accepted, because if it wasn't, some of these guys wouldn't get rewarded for it. And so at the end of the day, the judges and the followers play a significant part in defining where the sport goes. Because I remember there was a time when, like we talked about, back in 1990, they tried the drug testing and it didn't survive. People were complaining that they want to see freaks. Well, guess what? Today they have freaks and then some. So I still think when we speak in terms of bodybuilding, there has to be some sort of a balance. It's like you can't have the largest arms doesn't necessarily win a competition, or the best back alone. It's the best back with the lower extremity. Do they look balanced together? I would say that's what really define a true champion bodybuilder. Now, if someone could be could excel in certain areas, or have like we say a great upper body and maybe at a lower level competition become the best for that particular day. But when we're talking about the Mr. Olympia or the Arnold Classic, some of the most prestigious events in the world right now, I think they have to have that symmetrical balance. And, there has to be an appeal of symmetry in the whole development of the athlete.
Yes, I thought it was interesting that Nick Walker won last year. That was the look that won. And then this year he got second, and the look was more toward a Samson aesthetic look, which I agree. I think he should have won. I prefer that type of, aesthetics.
But I also say there's a time when a Nick Walker could win an event, because even though he's not the most symmetrical, when you take all the elements that would make the winner. So if let's say Samson Dowda was not in as good shape as he was, I could see Nick Walker beating him, even though he has the symmetry. Because you can't just say an out of shape symmetrical guy should beat a guy that's not as symmetrical. There has to be some sort of balance there where even though he is not as symmetrical, but his presentation, his condition, all those elements can still put him in a position where he could win. So it's not like Nick Walker will never win and that was an example in the previous Arnold. Someone can say, well, he is not the most symmetrical, but he was still in the best condition. He still presented himself very well. And maybe the person he was up against was not necessarily competitive enough to beat him, even though he wasn't the most symmetrical. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yes. I'm still kind of learning even how these judges work. I mean, I'm somewhat new to the sport, and, and seeing the differences, I still struggle with that because they all look pretty good to me on stage.
Yeah. and you're absolutely right. You're looking at some of the best bodybuilders, or should I say the best bodybuilders in the world. So you're at an extreme elite level, and judging them becomes more critical, and it becomes, so someone will say, for example, Nick Walker was in very good condition. He was very lean, very muscular. So someone would say he should win. And then a person like Mike Ashley will say, no disrespect to Nick, but he should not win because he was not the most symmetrical person. He had a torso that was, upper torso was long compared to his lower torso, so it wasn't a great balance. If you saw how he looked in the Mr. Olympia compared to the Arnold Classic, his legs got a little smaller. So he started looking a little bit more on the top heavy side, not to any extreme. So when you take all those elements, and Samson had a great presentation, Nick had a great presentation. So all those elements actually define the winner. It's not just, okay, I'm not the most symmetrical, but I'm in the best shape, so I should win. That alone does not win a competition, if that makes sense.
Yes. It kind of reminds me of beauty pageants, Miss Universe. It's, how is that one? That one's just as beautiful as that one. I mean, there's so much different criteria to look at what brings that person to the top first place position. Yeah.
So when you break it down in all the various elements, you will say, if you put them standing next to one another and you say the most complete presentation of a physique, Nick Walker would not beat Samson Dowda in my eyes on that day.
I agree.
No discredit to him and his accomplishment.
Yep. Okay, so it brings me to my next question, and that is about masters level at like the Olympics. That is that 50 and above or 40 and above?
40 and above. You're talking about the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, the masters level for the older guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you ever thought of competing in that?
I know this may sound a little bit surprising to you, but I basically moved on from competitive bodybuilding. And as much as I love it, we set certain standards for ourselves. Like if I walk on stage, I want to look a certain way. And I'm not in that realm anymore. I mean, I'm 63 years old, and we're talking about competing the guys against their 40s, which there's such a thing. Because I remember there's a gentleman by the name of Albert Beckles. And if you ever Google him and look him up, he was competing in his 60s when us, a lot of guys, we were in our 20s and 30s,
Wow.
and he did very well.
Mhm.
So there, such a thing exists, but I don't see myself going back. I will be more supporting the sport or helping upcoming athletes, but I don't see myself competing on the bodybuilding stage in the future.
Yeah, they don't make a distinction between the 43-year-old on stage and the 63-year-old on stage, right? There's not different classifications.
I don't know the breakdown, but I think
Okay.
there's going to be classifications.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I know that there's all talk about they'd love to see Phil Heath and Greene come back and battle it out on a master stage.
Well, both of those are great bodybuilders, and they were also a little bit controversial back in their time.
Yes.
So it would be exciting, and they both look very good now. So it's not like they have declined significantly from where they were when they actually competed. So it'd be interesting to see them. But again, that depends on what's in their minds, because we as the people on the outside might say, hey, yeah, we'd love to see Greene or Phil Heath, but we don't know what's inside Phil's mind right now or Kai's mind. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. One thing I looked at, the prize money, I don't think is going to be very attractive for those guys.
Was it like
And you never know.
50,000?
Huh?
50,000?
Yeah, I've heard
Something like
somewhere
that.
between 50 and 70,000.
Mhm.
Really, to in this day and age, to get those guys to compete for that, only if they just want to, it's a personal thing. It won't be based on compensation.
Yes, unless, well, if they made it 400,000, they might sign up.
If they made it 400,000, you would see a lot of guys start to like, whoa, wait a second, it's worth a try.
Yeah, you have Dexter Jackson, sign me up, I'm coming back. Even though he's been competing in his 50s, he's really been on the forefront of staying for a longevity of a bodybuilding career.
Yes, I would say he has had the most successful journey. Not necessarily in terms of, I mean, Ronnie Coleman is the greatest of all times, as far as I'm concerned. Lee Haney, Phil Heath, those guys really, they top the charts in terms of the amount of Mr. Olympias they have won. But I don't think there's any bodybuilder that has won more prestigious events than Dexter Jackson. I think he's like the competitor who has won the most bodybuilding events at the professional level. Yeah.
Most definitely. Well, let's talk about aging and training, which, you have a lot of knowledge on that. You've put it into practice for a while now. What would you say would be maybe some things that bodybuilders and powerlifters, as they age, that they need to maybe think about with exercise and training in their older years?
Well, I don't think we recover the same. We recover at the same rate as our younger counterparts. And I also think, and it's based on the history of the individual themselves. And why I say that is, a lot of joint issues as we age. Like myself, I've had knee issues, I've had shoulder issues. But I will also say that I was an extreme. I mean, I squatted extremely heavy, bench and powerlifting. I really went at it very aggressively. And I would say there's more information today that would cause me to train differently. And if I said, what would I have done differently? I would have did my programming a lot different. Not so much my nutrition as much, but my actual training, like the volume, set times weights times repetition. I did way too much volume, and it was managed properly. And a lot of, not just myself, a lot of us guys, we train arms. I mean, there have been times in the past where I do 16 sets for my biceps alone. That's ridiculous. I wouldn't do that much now. So if we say what we do at this age, definitely the volume would be a lot different. I mean, if you're doing 8-12 sets a week for biceps, for arms, if you're going to do it that way, at this age, that would be something. And I probably, as I evolve, I do more whole body trainings, so like where I talked about chest and back, I would do chest first and back after. now I do chest and back. They're opposing muscle groups, like you do a push pull. So I would do them back to back now, because my focus wouldn't be so much on trying to be an elite bodybuilder. So, I would do less and actually achieve more, because I would give myself more time to recover.
Oh, that's such good advice that people need to think about. Sometimes they're just thinking the here and the now and what they're putting their body to. And if you're going to the extreme, there is a price to pay sometimes for all of that extreme movement and stress on the body and so forth. Whereas if it's more of a moderate type of activity, then you're going to have better rest, recovery, and better success, I think, down the road into your older age.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say, and it depends on the individual, because you can get older and you can train frequently, or you can say, well, I'm not going to train so frequent. But the thing is not necessarily a workout that matters. It's a series of workouts. So what I look at now is, what do I do within a week or a month, as opposed to what I do in one specific bout. So the amount of volume, I would manage it better. I would not do as much, because there's a certain amount of muscle damage that is experienced as a result of the workout. And as we age, we really don't recover as well. Yeah, we could sleep, we could supplement, we could do all these various things. So I would be, be cognizant to that. Say, hey, I need to, even though my mind might be in that place from the past, my body is not. So as a result, I would manage it a little better. And that would be definitely an advice that I would give to people, that even though they want to experience the best they can be at their current age, whatever it might be, it's just that the approach has to be a little different.
Yes. You have to listen to your body. And a lot of times I think, like you said, your mind wants to do more, you think you can do more, but your knee says, no, we need to slow this down and take a break.
Yeah.
So I think that's really key.
So that's definitely something that I would take into consideration. And I'm currently taking into consideration, even though I liked it, the frequency, I just don't do as much volume.
Yes. So, a lot of people complain as they get older, the aches and the pain, and then getting out of the routine of working out, and then the hormones are out of whack, and stress and life. And what advice would you give for people to get motivated and to start, even if they're like 60 and up?
Well, you and we're currently sitting in the most valuable asset we have, right? Our bodies. It's the most valuable asset we have. And, sometimes I'll talk to individuals and they say, well, they talk about their kids, or they talk about their family members or their spouse, but none of that. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to experience. And I put it to the extreme. I say, let's say we check out today, right? All the good that we want to give to our family, all the love we want to give to our friends or kids or family members. If we're not here, we're not able to, they're going to be rejoicing in our memories because we have moved on. So if this is the most valuable asset and you want to get the most out of it, that really means that you need to invest the time and energy to do what's best for it. Because, and I use this example oftentimes when I speak to individuals. I said, when you go on a flight, whose mask do they tell you to put on first? Have you ever wondered why they say you should you have a child next to you and they say, your mask needs to go on first? Because by putting your mask on, you now have the ability to do what's in the best interest of your child or your family member. Well, the same goes to our bodies. If we don't take care of our bodies, or we don't put it on a high level of priority, then, not only will we more or less rob ourselves of quality of life, because the activities of daily living, when you lose the ability to do those various things, there's a significant decline mentally, and it also affects you physically. So if I was to say the most important thing is still try to eat, do cardiorespiratory fitness, it's a given, do some resistance training, because some people say, well, the cardio and not so much the resistance training. Well, you have to have the strength to do even the cardio. So we have to prioritize them, do the strength training, the cardiorespiratory fitness, adequate sleep, minimize stress. I have one motto is to stay away from toxic people because they stress you out. Stay more in positive environments. And so it has to be prioritized, and it has to be put in an arena that you say to yourself, if I really want to see the best self, my best self, as I continue to evolve, I have to invest in catering to it, so we can see that best of who we are as we continue to age.
Most definitely. There is numerous research studies that show the positive effects of strength training, especially for injury prevention. Because as you know, as you go down the path of life, if you have a fall, it could go spiral down. People just end up in the hospital, and then they have a blood clot and then death. It can spiral down pretty quickly. But Absolutely. If you have strength and you have not only flexibility, that's important, but they're showing now that strength and strength training is really beneficial for people in older adults.
Well, they have always catered to cardiorespiratory fitness as being more important than resistance training. And now it's the opposite. Resistance training is being put in the forefront because having the functional strength, or the ability to just function, there's a certain amount of strength that's involved with that. That allows you to do all the other things. So you were talking about as we age and falls, a lot of people injure their hip when they fall. And that's one of the worst things that can happen. And once you lose your ability to just function, depression starts. And it's a vicious cycle of things that will cause a person to really, actually check out earlier than intended, or they have the ability to stick around a lot longer than they imagine if they were to do strength training and cardiorespiratory fitness. And I'm also very big on the mobility, the flexibility aspect of it. As a matter of fact, I now try to get to a yoga class because of, if we don't have that adequate range of motion or the ability to move around, sometimes it can get pretty cumbersome in life.
Oh yeah, you hear old people joking about just bending over to pick up the pencil, your back will go out. They're exactly. Real cautious. And right. I had a friend who said he sprained his ankle while sleeping. I was like, what? It's just crazy.
Well, you'd be surprised at things that can happen. Yeah.
Yes, you have to have a sense of humor too with the aging process, and being kind with your body and things that come up, and resilience. Like my dad says, that aging is not for wimps. There's all kinds of things that you're going to encounter as part of the human experience, but why not set yourself up on best footing by good health, strength, flexibility, so forth.
Yeah, most definitely. We think of the components of fitness, and that answers it all: muscular strength, endurance, flexibility, cardiorespiratory fitness, and healthy body composition. So if we try to fulfill those various elements, we are on the path to a better quality of life long term. Yeah.
Yes. And it is also role modeling for future generations. And we have seen ample examples where people, a strong and healthy 60-year-old and an out of shape and unhealthy 30-year-old. I mean, so health age and biological age, they're two different things. People are aging at different rates. And one of the best things you can do is exercise as part of medicine.
Yeah. It's really, and the thing about it is, we evolved as a society to become more sedentary. If you think about our forefathers, they were a lot more and mothers, they were more active than we are.
Yes.
And as a result of modern technology, we have become more and more sedentary. And so we have to make that concerted effort to say exercise. I remember as a child in Jamaica, my mom, when she was doing laundry, she was on it was like a board that had ridges in there, and she would go back and forth with the clothes on there. And that was a significant amount of workout. And then they had to walk a certain distance with it, so when we think in terms of how much we have available to us, it puts us in a more sedentary society, and it causes us to say, well, I have to consciously take that step and exercise. I have to consciously make that step and, eat properly. I have to, but you know, it's like you said, it's the also you mentioned your dad. Some of it is how you influence your surrounding, whether it's your kids or your friends. You can have a positive impact on them, just like what you're doing now in a setting such as this, trying to share information that can actually improve the quality of people's lives.
Yes, yes. And like you said, it is a decision and a choice. And I think people have to make determinations for themselves. They need to get not just motivated, but be determined to set that goal, be determined to complete an action and keep your word that you were going to do it and you do it. You know, I think those are the types of conversations we need to have around it. It's not just, I think people have the knowledge, but how do they take that knowledge and turn it into skill and behavior change?
Yeah. And one of the things that's actually very interesting is they're actually being rewarded. They can see the difference. Let's say, for example, a person says, okay, well, I'm going to start doing a walk. Like say, I'm going to walk 15 minutes, work it up to 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times per week. When they start wherever they start at, if they were to do just their resting pulse alone, they're going to get a certain resting pulse when they start that exercise program. As they start to do it and do it continuously, they're going to see their resting pulse goes down. That's because the heart becomes more efficient. The amount of blood, they call it the stroke volume, the amount of blood they transport with each beat, the volume increases. So that within itself is an indicator. You talk to people that exercise, and if they do it consistently, they also have a better attitude. So you could see you could see changes within oneself. A person who gets adequate sleep, they're more energetic than the person who is tired. So that by not getting enough sleep. So any individual that, as you said, who make that decision to execute these habits, these positive habits towards their well-being, they're actually going to see rewards. Within 4 to 6 weeks, people are going to see significant changes that will motivate them to continue. So it's not like they're going to do it and nothing is going to happen. They're going to notice the difference.
Yes, yes. And I think people need to focus not on just the external type of stuff, like people patting you on the back and telling you look good, etc., but also like, how does it make you feel within? You know, when you're by yourself, you're like, man, I have more energy, or I'm sleeping better, or I'm just more pleasant to be around because I'm less cranky because I got in some cardio and some endorphins and serotonin and, you know, all of these internal rewards that you need to maybe recognize and work toward, because that is a reward you get for doing it.
Yeah. And the other encouraging thing is I think everybody should at least get an annual physical. I'm very passionate about getting physicals because one of the things, it shows you what your lifestyle habits, how are you being rewarded by your lifestyle habits. And also, if a person is not entertaining positive lifestyle habits, they'll also see those indicators that will say, you know, I really need to do something. You know, so that's one way to really you know, establish the value that surrounds the habits that we're talking about. Because when you go to the doctor and they do a complete physical, they're going to be able to say, hey, you know, the cholesterol looks good, you know, your resting pulse looks good, your blood glucose, resting blood glucose looks good. They have all these variables that they can respond to the individual and say, you know, keep these habits going because they're actually giving you a better quality of life.
Yes, yes. You want to prevent that heart attack, prevent that stroke, prevent that diabetes diagnosis if you can, or at least delay it, you know, so that it doesn't happen earlier than it should.
Right, most definitely.
Yes, yes. So do you have any other, just like maybe some final training tips you would give for the older population?
Well, when it comes to when I think in terms of the older population, and currently I do work with some individuals, like I have women in their 70s that would amaze you. The women that play golf, that would amaze you. I think the oldest person I've ever trained was 92. He passed away. I have, it so happened I visited one that he's 94 now, and I actually have him doing I got him a bike that he can use at home, set him up with bands, balls, and he's doing his little workout at home. And I think when we speak in terms of what can we do as we continue to get older, there's some basic movements. A squat. Now, the moment I say a squat, the first thing a person think of is the bar on a person's back. I mean, I'm talking about just sitting and standing. It's called a sit to stand. So if you talk about some basic movements, I would definitely want to see people do squats, because it's part of activities of daily living. And so that's going to be definitely of great importance. Another thing is, I call it's a supine bridge. So you lay on your back with your knees bent, pull them closer to your glutes, and extend your hip, a supine bridge. That's going to work the back of the legs, the hamstrings, and it's going to work the buttocks. So if we're talking from a movement standpoint, those, some sort of pushing and some sort of pulling, because they talked about the pillars of human movement. What are the things that are essential for us? We have to stand, we have to locomote, we have to push, we have to pull, some sort of level change, up, down, which is a squat, and we have to rotate. No one walks in a very linear fashion. Movement is a result of minor rotation back and forth. So if we were to take those elements and whatever program we're doing, that is part of the program. And a push-up doesn't necessarily mean a push-up on the ground. It could be a push-up off a dresser. It could be, so it can be an elevated push-up and some sort of pulling movement. And nowadays you can get bands, or there's so many different ways you can do a pulling movement and, you know, train the core. It could be, and there's a gentleman, Stuart McGill. I'm sure you're probably familiar with him. He's from Waterloo, Canada, and he talks about, you know, being able to do quadruped or bird dog. I don't know if you know what it is. When you stand, like, we call it like tabletop. You just your knees on the ground, your hands on the ground, raise your right arm, your left leg, and opposition. That trains the posterior core. So something like that. And something as simple as a curl up. It doesn't even sit up is not necessarily the best thing. So some sort of core movement. And rotation could be as easy as laying on your back and rotate your legs side to side. And that would be, you know, like an overall, some sort of resistance type of work. And outside of that, walk, walk, walk.
Yes, yes. That's all, like, I think they call it functional fitness. Yes. And so, like, I've even heard just getting up and down from the ground, practicing that movement, because as you get older, some people struggle getting up off of the ground. So if you just do that throughout your life, getting up, getting down, you know, just never stop doing that.
Right. And the thing about it is try not to avoid some of these activities, because the moment some individuals get challenged with various activities, they feel like, well, now I'm going to avoid it. And it's actually the time when a person should say, you know, I really need to do this, because at some point, when depression starts, when you lose the ability to just do those basic activities, you know. So I would definitely recommend that people make it make it a part of their life, because it's not a thing where it's not like we don't have to. We really have to in order to really have long-term quality of life. Yes.
And I love that you pinpointed there's modifications that can be done. You can always modify the exercise. It doesn't have to look like when you did it in your 20s. You're just now going to do your 80-year-old version of that exercise, but you can still do whatever you want to do and whatever goal you want to do. I always say, if you want to start tango dancing at 70, do it. You can do it. It may not look what tango dancing look like at 20, but you can tango dance at 70. So yeah, just do the modifications and do them appropriately and safely.
You would be amazed. I have ballroom dancing. Like, I have one lady, she's 77, and you'd be amazed at how well she moves. And the whole idea behind it is because the mindset is there to continue to push forward. And as a result, she says, oh, my grandkids, they just love the fact that they don't see her as the age that she is, because she's so active. And, you know, it's just investing some time, as we said earlier, in your most valuable asset, which is the body of yours.
Yes, yes. And not only that, your mind, I don't know if you've seen some of the scary statistics on dementia that's coming down the road, and people can do things to help prevent and keep their mind sharp through exercise, because you have to, like, you know, especially if you do something like dancing, there's a mind body connection that's taking place.
Yeah. I mean, it actually enhances your motor skills or keep
Mhm.
them, you know, from declining as they continue to do these various activities. And the other interesting part is when they continue to do them, they don't see that decline that is most considered for maybe certain age groups. You know, they'll be like, whoa, but I'm not like my counterparts.
Yep. We're all aging at different rates for sure, based on lifestyle, genetics. There's lots of things that come into play, but control what you can control and modify what you can modify. But, you know, and get schooled on what you can't control, like genetics, where you might need to, you know, tamper some of your risks and so forth.
Right. Most definitely.
Yes, yes. So we're getting here toward the end, and I was just wondering if you have any final thoughts you would like to share with the audience.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me
Oh,
here.
thank you for
And
coming
I
on my
hope,
channel.
yes, and I hope that, you know, the information I've shared with you can be instrumental to someone, because I've always looked at any environment in which I go and I speak to a group. I always say, if I could touch one life, it was worth the experience. I remember saying the same thing when I was at the Arnold Classic, and I continue to do that because, you know, we're all here, and some of us really don't understand our purpose. We still try to question and get a good understanding, but we're here together. So how can we help one another make the best of what we have here? And I think your endeavor by having this site and sharing information is making a difference in many individuals' lives. And if I could, the thing that I would like to give individuals watching this experience to think about is, well, what can you do for yourself to make you a better person when it comes to your health, when it comes to your interaction with others, and then what can you share with someone else that can make a difference in their lives? Because if we continue to not only to improve ourselves but share it with others, we can make ourselves a better society as a whole. And that would be the best message I could give.
Oh, that is excellent. Thank you so much. And you have touched my life, so you can rest assured you've touched one at least. So I do.
Thank you very much. All right.
Yes, yes. I do appreciate you coming on my channel. And if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to be alerted to when the next video drops. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Michael.